Hi friends, welcome to Getting Started with SQL Server Log Shipping. My name is John Morehouse, and in this brief video, we're going to look at some of the nuances and components of SQL Server Log Shipping and how you can use it for disaster recovery purposes. A little bit more about me. I'm a community speaker and blogger. I've been in the community speaking and teaching for many years now. I'm honored to be a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and I have a distinct passion around high availability and disaster recovery. A lot of organizations seem to skip over particularly the DR part of that. So I really enjoy helping companies get the proper disaster recovery solution in place. And sometimes we overlook log shipping. It's a stable and tried and true option. In certain situations, it is a great solution for you. My contact information is on the slide before you. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I do have a YouTube channel. I've got some videos, and I do blog at johnmorehouse.com or sqlrs.com. Same website. So, brief agenda. We're going to talk about RPO and RTO and why those two nomenclatures or the acronyms are important. We're going to talk about what is log shipping and what does the concept mean for log shipping. And then we're going to go over the architecture and components. I'm going to actually show you a demonstration of setting up log shipping. And then we'll wrap it up with a matrix of pros and cons and a brief summary. And then we'll get you out of here. All right. What is RPO and RTO? So these are two concepts that you probably, if you've done any type of disaster recovery solution, you've had some conversation, or hopefully you've had some conversation with the leadership of your organization where you define these two values. Now, RPO is recovery point objective, and this really defines how much data in terms of time can you withstand losing. Quite often, that is defined in seconds or minutes. Um, some organizations go as far as hours. For example, I do have clients where their RPO is 24 hours. And what that means is that they can lose up to 24 hours worth of data and still be viable in terms of the business. If they lose that much data, they're okay. They can reproduce it, they can regenerate it. They've got other means and methods to recoup that data, and it's not going to be detrimental to the actual business. RTO is recovery time objective. And this is also measured in time, usually seconds or minutes, um, is defining how fast we have to get back online. Most organizations, at least in my experience, have like a 15-minute RTO, which means that they need to get back online within 15 minutes. Some organizations also have 24 hours. Just like my clients have 24 hours of RPO, their RTO is also 24 hours. That means that they've got 24 hours by their own policy to get back online, and they can lose up to 24 hours worth of data and still be viable. Each organization is different. If you are examining disaster recovery solutions, you really need to make sure that you have these conversations with your leadership so that you can identify the right solution that can satisfy the RPO and RTO values. If your RPO and RTO are very low, meaning 10 seconds, 15 seconds, a minute, 10 minutes, whatever, that will help dictate and drive the appropriate disaster recovery solution that you can implement. Some disaster recovery solutions can't meet those goals, so you need to make sure that you align your solution with the organizational set forth RPO and RTO values. So as we go forward in future content, you'll probably see more and more of RPO and RTO come into the picture, and as we relate it to the products that we have. So what is log shipping? Log shipping is a tried and true method that has been around in SQL Server for a very long time. We like to joke that, at least here in the United States, it's old enough to drink, which means that it has to be 21 years old. Um, and I believe it's older than that. I think it came out in SQL Server 6.5. I could be wrong, but it's been around for a very, very long time. It is a very valid and stable disaster recovery solution that often gets overlooked because it's not overly complicated, and it will do disaster recovery for a lot of organizations. And the architecture behind it is kind of just like what it sounds. We take a full backup of a database, and in that database, we then take a transaction log backup and we ship that transaction log backup to a secondary server. Once it arrives on that secondary server, there's a process that will restore that to a recovered or a restoring database on the instance. So we are literally shipping the transaction log backup to a secondary over the network. So first and foremost, we take a backup, and then we copy that transaction log backup to that secondary instance, just like what I mentioned. Once it gets there, there's a job that will restore that transaction log backup to a secondary database, and then that secondary database will be essentially a mirror copy of the primary, at least up until that last transaction log backup was applied. So if you do transaction log backups every 15 minutes, your secondary is probably going to be 50, at minimum 15 minutes behind than what your primary is. So it's not as synchronous as like availability groups or failover cluster instances. So there is some latency between the secondary and the primary becoming synchronized, but it's a great DR solution. Where does it make sense to use log shipping? If you need a simple disaster recovery and you don't have a huge data estate, there's no real additional costs with using log shipping. You don't need shared storage. You don't need all the components of availability group or failover cluster instance. Log shipping is super easy to set up. It's low cost. You can go across versions if you want. The downside about doing cross version is that you can't fail back, right? So if you have a higher level SQL Server on your secondary, if you were to fail over and bring that database online, then it is the new primary. You can't reverse engineer that log shipping traffic. You can use it to go cross region. Ideally, any disaster recovery solution is going to have two data centers, a minimum of 150 miles apart from each other. Lot of times we see DR solutions that might go across the continental United States, or across Europe or across Australia, wherever you may be. But we want a large distance between the two so that way Mother Nature doesn't come along and destroy both data centers at the same time. Here on the East Coast of the United States, we have to worry about hurricanes. So if my client is on the East Coast, I typically like to go to the middle of the United States, if not all the way across to the West Coast. Log shipping, I can do that. As long as I have the network components where I can ship from point A to point B and the network latency is not horrible, log shipping doesn't really care. It will just ship it across the wire and be there and restore it when we need it. So what are some of the components? I kind of already mentioned some of this. There is a primary and secondary databases. You can have one primary, but you can have multiple secondaries. So if I wanted to have two or three secondaries and maybe in different regions, just to protect myself, I can do that. So I can ship my transaction log backups to multiple targets. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. I can have 1-to-3, 1-to-4, whatever. There is a log backup job that runs. If you're familiar with database maintenance and maybe you use solutions like Ola Hollengren, which is a fantastic solution to use, in his case, that solution has a single backup job for managing backups for all the databases. It is worth noting, I believe that his solution actually identifies databases that are in a log shipping configuration and will automatically skip those databases. When you set up log shipping for a database, it will actually create a new log backup job for that particular database. So one of the downsides is that if you have a very large data estate, think thousands of databases on an instance, and you try to log ship a number of them, you will have a bunch of individual log backup agent jobs. At that point, it gets very overwhelming, and you probably need to look at a different solution. There's a backup copy agent job, and what that does is actually picks up the transaction log backup. That job will actually pick that up, and that does the work by sending it across the wire to my secondaries. And just like there was a a log backup job, there's going to be a copy job for each individual database. And then on the secondary, there's going to be a backup restore job. Now, and just like the other two, there's going to be one for every single database on the secondary. This job does exactly what you think it does. Once that backup has landed on my secondary, This job will run on a schedule. All the jobs run on a schedule that you can adjust and define. That backup job will pick up the most recent transaction log backup, restore it to the secondary, and then wait for any subsequent backups to arrive. One of the cool things about log shipping is that it does have native monitoring. So there is a report that we can, and I'll show it to you in the demo. You can actually see the current status of all the databases that might be involved in log shipping, what their latency is, the last time that a backup occurred, last time that the file was copied, the last time it was restored. And you can use that monitoring tool to just quickly identify if you have any issues going on. One of the things I like about log shipping, it's not as sensitive to like network failures as what like availability groups are. If you have a network issue and the connectivity between the primary and the secondary goes down, uh, log shipping will continue to take log backups. And then once the network has been restored, the copy job will pick all those log backups up, send them across the wire. The restore job will recognize that those new files are there and then start to replay them and restore them to the secondary. Log shipping does come in a couple different modes. Quite often, one of the issues that we see when we're doing disaster recovery is clients want a readable secondary, meaning that they want to be able to offload some of their read workloads to a secondary, and they can withstand the latency to the secondary instance, but they want to be able to read from it. Uh, Availability groups you can do that with. Failover cluster instances you can't. Log shipping you can. There are caveats. So log shipping has two modes. The first one is no recovery. And what that means is that the secondary databases are in a restoring state and can't be read from. So if you were to try to open them in Management Studio or Azure Data Studio or VS Code, you can't do that. The database is not fully online. It is in a restoring state. You can configure it for a standby or readable state. And what that means is that the secondary databases will be readable. You can query them and do things with them. You can't modify data, but you can run select statements and actually query that data out. The downside is that you have to configure it either to disconnect any connected users when the next restore happens, or you have to manually disconnect those users and then do the restore. So if you manually, if excuse me, if you configure that secondary to disconnect the users, at the next time that the job to restore the transaction log backups runs, it will disconnect any users that might be attached and then restore the database and bring it forward to be, within that 15-minute window where that RPO value is when the last time the transaction log backup was taken, and then bring the database back online in a standby or readable state. At that point, those end users would have to reconnect or have retry logic in their application if they're using an app. But you can configure log shipping secondaries in a standby state if you so desire. I thought it'd be handy just to do a quick comparison between the two, or between the three. This is a graphic that I generated. Um, between the three log shipping availability groups and failover cluster instance. All three are great DR solutions. I've used all three. From a cost perspective, log shipping is probably going to be your lowest. There is no automatic failover in log shipping. You have to manually failover and bring that database online or write code to do it. Whereas availability groups and failover cluster instances has things baked in that we can say as soon as there's a failure or there's an issue, SQL Server is going to automatically do something, or the failover or the cluster instance is going to automatically do something. Um, Log shipping and availability groups, we do get a readable secondary. We don't get that with an FCI because of the shared storage, and we don't have a readable secondary copy of the database. Log shipping and availability groups only protects at the database level. Now we can log ship all the databases or put all the databases into an availability group if you're running enterprise. Whereas the failover cluster instance will protect the entire instance. Everything on the instance gets failed over to the secondary. So it is a instance level DR solution that if you wanted to protect everything, you could. Uh, and the log shipping is, in my opinion, much easier to configure and maintain than availability groups and failover cluster instances. So again, if you have a small data estate and you're looking for just a simple DR solution, log shipping would be a great solution to evaluate. And I'm going to show you what it looks like from a configuration standpoint. So with that, let's get into the demo and we will see how easy it is. Yay, we're in the demo. So what I have is I have a SQL Server 2025 instance running in Azure. Pretty simple. It's running Developer Enterprise Edition. And on here, I've got a couple databases, as you can see. I have three databases, and we're going to use the AdventureWorks 2025 database as my demo. Um, and one of the things that I like about log shipping is that you can actually restore it to the same instance. So I don't have to have a secondary instance for this demonstration. I'm actually going to restore it to itself, and so that you can see that it all works on one single instance. I've gone ahead and set up two folders on the local hard drive. I have a log shipping underscore backups and a log shipping underscore target or copy target. These folders I have set up to be shared. When you configure log shipping, it's easier if you used UNC paths. So both of these folders are shared, and I'll show you where to plug these in when you configure it. And they're going to do exactly what you think it's going to do. So I'm going to tell SQL Server to take the transaction log backups into the backups folder. The copy target is where the backup is going to be copied to, and then the restore job is going to read from the copy target folder and apply the transaction log backup to the secondary copy of the database. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. So if we come over here in Management Studio and right click the database we want to log ship, and the other thing that's really cool about log shipping is that all of this can be scripted out. So you can do this once, click script, and script out the whole configuration and then automate it to some degree. I'm a huge fan of automation. If we go to tasks, there's an option here called ship transaction log. And this brings up a secondary dialog window. We're going to enable uh, log shipping for this particular database. We can change the backup settings if we want. We need to specify our folder, our UNC path to our backup folder. So this is log shipping 01, log shipping backup. Make sure I get the right file name. Backups, plural. My keyboard did not want to work. And because I'm on this local instance and I'm backing up to a folder on the instance, I need to also specify my local directory path. And that is just located in the temp folder. We can see it right there. It's just in the temp folder. So C temp log shipping underscore backups is the local folder. Um, there is some maintenance that it's going to want to do. So it'll delete backups after 72 hours. If there's no backup within 1 hour, you can alert on it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you have network issues and your connectivity to your secondary breaks down or whatever, and it goes beyond that 72 hours, you are going to start to lose transaction log backups. And then the secondary won't be able to be brought up to date, and you're going to have to resynchronize those. So make sure that you specify this time frame to account for any potential network issues that you might have. I typically will leave it at 72 hours, depending on the quality of the network connectivity. If I've got a super solid network, it never goes down. 72 hours is probably fine. You might, if you don't have, if you've got a wish-washy internet connection between the two data centers, you might want to adjust this to a little bit higher. So that way, just in case, like over the weekend, you know that files aren't going to be deleted and you don't have to worry about resynchronizing the secondary. Backup job, I can schedule it. This looks very familiar to maintaining and monitoring a standard SQL Server agent job. In this case, it defaults to every 15 minutes. I like that time frame. It's going to run every 15 minutes and do my transaction log backup. I can change the job name if I want so desire. But again, I'm going to have a job for this particular database. So if I were to do this for wide world importers, I would have a job called ls backup underscore wide world importers. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to add my secondary. I'm actually going to connect right back to myself. Here, I'm going to change the name of the secondary database to -ls for log shipping. Um, when I initialize the secondary, I can do a number of things. I can seed it on my own. I can restore it from a backup. Or if I do it on my own, then I can just say the database has already been initialized. In this case, I'm going to just tell the management studio to do the backup for me. And then when I copy files, same thing. I have to specify the UNC path. Copy target. So this will, and again, we see a copy job down here, and it's going to run every 15 minutes. You can click that schedule and change that schedule if you so desire. Um, but this is going to copy those backups into the copy target. And then I'm going to specify my restore option. So this is the mode that I was talking about. I can say no recovery, so it's going to stay, that secondary is going to stay in a restoring state, or I can say standby and disconnect my users when restoring. I'm just going to go ahead and say no recovery mode, and this can be changed. So after the fact, you can go back into this dialog and actually change that and click OK. And then the next log backup that gets applied will capture this change, and the database will come online after it gets restored. Same thing, deleting stuff, same thing. We got jobs. I'm going to click OK. I can script the whole configuration here, or I can come up here and say script if you so desire. I'm just going to click OK. So right now, Management Studio is taking a full backup of the database. It's going to restore it to that new database name that I specified. We can see that it just popped up in Management Studio over on the left. It is in a restoring state. The save primary backup setup has been done. Everything is success. We are green. Yes. We can actually go into these folders. There's the full. I don't have a backup, a transaction log backup yet that has been taken. I can manually kick that off. I have to start the agent. Now, they didn't fail because the agent wasn't running, because in this case, it just took a manual full backup. And then now that the agent is running, we can see that I got my alerts or my jobs right here. I have a backup, a copy, and a restore. There's a so these three jobs, I can manually kick them off. So it's going to generate a transaction log backup and drop it right there. If I manually run the copy, it's going to pick that file up and drop it into here. And if I were to start the restore job, it's going to pick this file up out of the copy target and restore it. And we can see that the restore job was completed successfully, which means that it applied that most recent transaction log backup. Now, one of the things I did mention was the native monitoring. If you right click the instance, go to reports. If you don't have it in the very bottom yet, go to standard reports, the very bottom, transaction log shipping status. Next time you go to that location, it will actually be in your quick select option, so you can just get to it really pretty quickly. And here we can see the transaction log shipping status for my database. We're at a healthy state. The last backup was a minute ago. The threshold is 60 minutes before it starts to alert. The last time the copy, since the last copy was 0 minutes because I just did it. You can see the restore latency. Again, the threshold's 45 minutes. We can see the most recent copied and restored file. So you can easily see how this reporting tool can be pretty useful, especially if you have a small data estate. If you've got a really big data estate, I don't know how useful this particular monitoring tool will be. But for small implementations of log shipping, this is my first go-to if there's any type of problem. to quickly identify what issues I have going on and what I can do to go fix it. So, as you can see, pretty easy to configure log shipping. I've got the databases online. We can see right here, here's my primary. Here's my secondary. It's in a restoring state, so I can't read it. But if I wanted to, I could go change the log shipping configuration and actually bring it online. So with that, why don't we jump back to the slides? And here we are back in the slides, like magic. Um, we are going to talk about some pros and cons of log shipping. I put together this matrix of pros and cons, which I thought would be helpful for you to download and print off, or at least take a screenshot of. You can have to use later. So some pros: log shipping is super easy to implement. I hope in the demonstration you saw how easy it was to get that set up and rolling. There was nothing really major that we had to do to make it work. While it's easy to implement, if you have a larger data estate, I have seen environments that have thousands of databases on a given SQL Server instance. Log shipping might not scale to that level. So it's easier to implement on a smaller scale. So if you're a smaller organization, this might be a great fit for you. If it's something larger, you might want to look at other solutions. Um, the native basic monitoring, as you saw, it was super easy to get to. It was very easy to quickly identify the latency of the log shipping process. Do I have a database that's out of sync or there's a problem? I can go get it fixed. It is free and easy to use. However, it can be limited. And if you're dealing with environments with minimal downtime and you need a faster response, you might want to look at other solutions for monitoring. You can write T-SQL scripts. There are other third-party tools that would identify those problems. Or if you need another solution that has real-time notification hooks like Slack or APIs or email alerts. And so you might want to look at other products like Dbvisit's Standby MP. They do have hooks in their environment where they can do real-time notifications on issues. So if you haven't looked at Standby MP by Dbvisit, um, it's built on top of log shipping, so that might be a great solution for you. Delayed response in the secondary. I like this as an option. The other tools, availability groups, and Failover Cluster Instances, you can, FCIs, you can't do it, but AGs, you can pause data shipping. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do it. But with log shipping, you can very easily just delay the restore on the secondary. That allows you to catch any malicious activity. I actually, in a former life, I was a consultant, worked at a client. They would delay their restore on their secondaries by 12 hours. The notion was that if something bad happened, whether it was malicious or accidental, somebody did a delete from table without a where clause, they had 12 hours to catch that problem and prevent it from overriding the data on the secondaries. So they delayed their restores on their secondaries by 12 hours. No complex infrastructure. Um, if you've ever dealt with availability groups or FCIs, setting up the infrastructure underneath the hood for those two solutions can get complicated depending on what you're doing. Whereas with log shipping, as you saw, it was super easy to get set up and rolling. I didn't have to set anything up. I actually used the exact same instance for both the primary and the secondary. No impact on the primary. Availability groups, you can somewhat impact the primary if things get backed up. The log blocks don't get sent over to the secondaries and they don't get restored. With log shipping, we are dealing with nothing but native SQL Server backups, which we should be taking anyways. I hope that everybody who is watching is taking their backups regularly and consistently, and you're testing your backups. But that's all we're dealing with is backup files. So we take the backup and then we ship the transaction log back up to the secondaries and get them restored. There is no impact really to the primary in that whole process. The only impact that might be is the copy process, depending on where those backups live. But the copy process is probably the only thing that would affect the primary. Some cons: there is a manual failover. It does not have automatic failover like FCIs or availability groups. So if you do need to fail over, you have to manually intervene. You have to bring that secondary database online, either through the user interface of Management Studio, or you can write scripts to do it. You can automate it to some degree, but you have to do that. You have to build that process in order to facilitate that. You do have a potential of data loss because you are shipping logs based off your RPO and RTO and um, the frequency of your log backups. If something were tragic were to happen, you do run a risk of losing data on your secondary just because the backups don't get sent over and they don't get applied. So you have to be very aware that you do have a tolerance for data loss when we're using log shipping. No automatic reinitialization. And what that means is that if we do fail over, if I do bring that secondary database online, it does not reverse the flow of the transaction log backup or shipping. I have to reconfigure that on the new, what is now the new primary. Availability groups, if I fail over, it automatically starts to sync the other direction. With log shipping, that does not happen. So, and we're relying on agent jobs. As you saw when I created the log shipping in the demonstration, I had 3 different agent jobs that got created. So if I have multiple databases that are involved in a log shipping configuration, I'm going to have many agent jobs, and that can get convoluted pretty quickly. So you have to be aware that you have to be comfortable dealing and managing agent jobs. No instance level protection. Um, Availability groups doesn't give instance level protection either. There are concepts of like contained AGs, so we have a little bit better protection. FCIs are the only thing that truly provides full level um, instance level protection. The whole instance moves over. Um, Log shipping, we do this at a database level, so we only protecting the databases themselves, and not the entire instance with log shipping. So, with that, let's wrap this up. The summary: we did an overview of log shipping. We went through the different components of the process and the tools. I hope that I showed you very easily of how to configure it, how to set it up, and how those components all work together. And then we reviewed the pros and cons, and so you've got that matrix of pros and cons that you can keep and use for future reference. Um, and while there are a lot of benefits, there are some limitations to the tool. And in future content coming by Dbvisit, we're actually going to talk about Standby MP, their product, and how they actually took the strengths and the weaknesses and removed some of those limitations. So make sure you stick around and watch for future content from me in conjunction with Dbvisit, because we're going to talk about their tools and how they helped fix some of these limitations from log shipping. So make sure you stick around. With that, thank you very much. I am John Morehouse. This was sponsored by Dbvisit, so be sure to check them out. Check out their product, Standby MP. My contact information and various socials are on the slide before you. And more content is coming. So if you liked this video, make sure you watch out for future notifications, and I will see you on the next video. Thank you much and have a great day.